everybody. I would like to introduce Callie Smith, resident poet and MFA third year student. Callie, just say hello to the future MFA classes.
Hello, future. Welcome.
So, um, let's just get started. When did you enter this program?
I entered fall of 2015, so
Okay.
this is 3 years.
And why did you enter this particular program? What attracted you about it, or why did you decide this one?
Well, I went to an undergrad at UALR in Little Rock, and I was very happy. My life at that time, I was living around there, I have family there, so I knew I wanted to stay close to
Mhm.
home, so I was very happy in terms of location. But I was also um, just very happy about working with Sandy Longhorn. She was still a relatively new hire at that time, so I thought that was a great opportunity to get to start working with her. And my undergrad was in English secondary education, so I knew after I finished that I wanted to pursue graduate work, and I had always had an interest in creative writing that I didn't get to fully discover as an undergrad, which I guess who does as an undergrad. That's just the
Mhm.
burgeoning joy of learning that you like writing. So I definitely wanted to pursue that. So that's why it was perfect, location and a great opportunity to continue and learn, actually really start for me my
Mhm.
creative writing adventure.
Great. So, what has been the same as you expected going into the program?
Well, I was expecting to write, and we certainly have done
Mhm.
a lot of that. I didn't really have much of an idea when I entered the program. I should have done more research than I did, but um, like workshop classes and the workshop method, I had been exposed to that a little bit as an undergrad, so I was expecting some of that now in grad school, and so that sort of environment was familiar
Mhm.
um, and what I expected.
Cool. What's been different than what you expected?
Um, the range of things that I would have to study. So I knew we were a generalist program when I came in, but I don't think I had fully processed that, and so um, I, which has been a good thing I think overall, because I was exposed to fiction and creative nonfiction, and in a way that I wouldn't have pursued on my own. So that has been a good difference. Like the amount to which we'd have to study those things was different than I expected. I thought, oh, you'll really just be focusing on poetry and occasionally taking this, but I feel like I got a pretty balanced, well-rounded exposure to those different genres.
So, this was not on the list, but it occurred to me as you were answering that question. I've noticed a tendency with a lot of people to want to stay in their chosen mode of writing. What would you advise people, since this is a generalist program, on that? Because it's been my experience that it benefits you to step outside your comfort zone. But
Right.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Um, well, I think like when I was taking classes outside of my genre, so I write poetry, but when I took like fiction or I took a travel writing course, I always kept in mind that I would take that knowledge and use it to better my poetry. So, and if not that, which there's a lot of things that did, just thinking about writing in general, I think strengthens all of it in some ways. But um, because I got to teach intro to creative writing, it was very helpful
Mhm.
to get to take those other classes and learn and have ways of teaching that modeled, so I could then go into the classroom
Yeah.
and use some of those ways, because I would have been, you know, having to really reach for other resources to teach those things if I hadn't had so much exposure. I still went and learned more as much as I possibly could to
Hmm.
teach them, but it was really helpful to have exposure to those different genres, how to teach them, what they are, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so, how have your plans and goals changed over the course of your time in the MFA
A lot,
program?
a lot. I look back at 2015, and a lot in my personal life changed, which I think you know, uh, you can never escape the personal life. I know you have also and many of us here, over the course of 3 years, life is bound to happen. So for me, I think I became much more focused uh, than I was in the beginning. In the beginning, this was something that I wanted to do, but I hadn't really firmed up what being a writer meant, what I wanted to do with it. In the beginning, when I came, it just started as I want to have a master's so I can go and teach high school. And while that still might be something that I do, now I'm like, actually, going through the thesis process built a lot of confidence in as a writer, trying different things built confidence as a writer. My voice in terms of writing and how I've grown in the program, my voice is certainly, it feels like my own, because I didn't come in with a lot of writing experience and having a sense of my own voice and aesthetic in writing. Just general thoughtfulness at what makes a good poem, because I didn't really have much of an idea about that coming in. And so this has been an incredible 3 years just to grow so much, and I feel like I have been given the opportunity with the faculty and working with classmates to grow. So I would just say, you know, having a better idea of myself as a person, quite frankly, but also as a writer. And so it's just been a tremendous time of growth.
Thank you. So, what strategies have you adopted to make it through the program?
Yeah, well, a lot of them are like basic student strategies. You just gotta, I use my calendar in my phone. I set like reminders 2 hours before, 2 days before. So just keep a schedule, because things, do get very busy, and it's good to stay on track of that. I've made many attempts, and we read many books about, how to have a writer's life. What time should you wake up? What kind of food should you eat? Like what kind of pets should you have? I mean, not that, I'm just joking now, but I never quite established this, habitual schedule. But I would make sure that, just you have to find time within your schedule. So a lot of it is just basic human stuff that you have to do if you want to, be on time, places, and get things done.
Okay. Well, you kind of went into my next question about time management. What do you wish someone had told you either as you were going into the program or as you were making your way along?
I wish that, and I don't know if this is, the failure of someone not to say this, but I would have loved more, in the first year, like, think about your thesis, start on your thesis, or even if you don't start on it, really begin brainstorming for the thesis, because my thesis didn't really take shape. I had used some things that I had written, of course, during the first 2 years, but I was still kind of floundering when I hit the summer before my third year, and that's not a place you want to be, with the thesis defense date coming up in the spring. You think you have your whole third year, but you really just have maybe that fall, and that's it, because the spring, when you defend, is just, you're looking like you absolutely know. You just went through this too. I mean, the spring is, you're setting your defense date, you're sending out the draft, it's done. So I wish that more emphasis would have been put on thinking about that final thesis project from the beginning. And I recommend, coming in, you may come in, I've known people who've come in with a book, I've known people like me who come in having written maybe, not as much, not a whole complete project. But in your classes, have your thesis in mind. Like, maybe you try to still, allow yourself to explore, but also if you can write for your thesis in your classes within the assignments, that would be really helpful too. That way it's not all piling up on you.
Kind of pulling from what you're learning to apply to what you're going to do.
Yes, absolutely. So always keep that as the end goal. Like, keep that in mind.
Excellent. So how have you utilized your MFA community, meaning students, faculty, just people you have met and dealt with over the course of these 3 years?
Yeah, well, our students here are just really wonderful. I can't think of a sweeter group of people. So on a personal level, there's been some that I've really connected with and will be lifelong friends and even a partner, so there's that part of the community that you meet. And in classes, making the most of, am I giving good feedback? Am I supporting this person's vision for their writing? And always keeping each classmate peer, keeping their vision for their writing in mind and doing your best to nurture that in classes or even in conversations. The faculty have just been wonderful. I took a directed study with Sandy Longhorn. I worked as an intern for the CD Write Women's Writers Conference with Sandy. So there's always these branching opportunities with all of our faculty here, really. And so just finding those and making the most of them. And I really, plan to stay in touch with not only my fellow classmates for years to come, but also the faculty. So it's a great way to build these lifelong, contacts, friends, however close or, business you want it to be. And just being exposed to the literary community. I didn't realize it was so what all that had to offer in Arkansas and even nationally. And so we definitely get exposure to that both at home here, the literary community, and nationally and even internationally, I guess, in some cases, which is nice.
So we're not exactly a hotbed of conflict, but how would you recommend addressing conflict problems or challenges that arise within the program?
Are you thinking just in general conflict or between
I mean,
people?
it could be between students, or if you had an issue with a member of the faculty, or had some sort of difficulty in trying to accomplish a goal. It could be all of those things if you want to talk about all of those things, or a specific thing that you would like to address.
I mean, there's I guess it would depend on the specific situation. We'll just start with, with faculty or with the program in general. Like if there's something that the program isn't offering you, or you're not exactly satisfied with how a certain class went. I will say our faculty seem, from experience and from what I've seen other people experience, very open to feedback. And so I think, don't be afraid to have a thoughtful, you have to do your own work to be thoughtful and make sure what you're presenting is, well reasoned, but have a thoughtful conversation with a faculty member, or even send them some kind of written communication if you don't want to have that, face-to-face conversation. But just have your specific concerns in mind, and maybe not just dump them on them. Like say, okay, here's what I would like to see happen, and here's how I'm willing to be part of that change. So just taking a proactive approach to that. Between students, I mean, fortunately, that's a great thing, as I haven't seen or experienced much of that. I mean, of course, anytime anyone in the world gets together, there's bound to be some kind of conflict. But I guess just have, if it's where you can talk to that person directly, then have that conversation with them. If it isn't, find some way to mediate that conversation in a proactive way. Had a thought, but it escaped me. I might be able to come back to it. Yeah, it does that. I just absolutely had a thought and it escaped me. But
we can definitely come back to it. Yeah. I was going to say, what do you think would benefit this program that future students could work on or work toward? Because obviously each of us has things we care about, but only so many hours in the day.
Yeah. While we do have a good sense of camaraderie and community, I don't know how much good that's doing our writing necessarily. I mean, we do have our classes, we have our workshop, we have giving feedback within classes. But, I know someone who he came to this program thinking that he came with a book, not published, but a manuscript completed, and he came thinking, okay, I want to be around people that will read this, give me feedback, and he's also willing to read others, and he has many times, like, read other people's work and give them feedback outside of the classroom. So I think something to where, you know, there's this invitation to read other people's work, and to have your own work read outside of that. Because I think that might also go with why so many of us are kind of shy about publishing. I mean, I know that there's always those go-getters, like, you're really good about it, Drew's really good about it. But the idea of an audience, which outside of the classroom community, I don't think many of us have this idea of how to engage the audience and how to think about, you know, the wider world in terms of sending our work out. Once it's been produced for me, what do I do with it? So I don't know how that could be. I know, like you said, there's only so many hours in the day, and one thing I love about our program, but I think also can be challenging, is that a lot of people do have lives outside of it. We've got children, or we have jobs, or we have all these things. So I know there's only so much you can ask of people, but that could be something I might think of.
Yeah, it occurred to me that one of the things I did not know when I entered the program was basically what the issues were. So I was trying to look to people to kind of, okay, what can I do as I'm moving through? So. And
going back to, like what I said earlier about keeping your thesis project in mind, is it's good in class whenever, you know, you have to write a short story. And, like, I wrote short stories, but they had nothing to do with my thesis. And it was good to see, okay, these are the issues, and it was good to have those identified. But maybe the issues that I really needed to have conversations about that would hurt my thesis project, there wasn't always enough space or support to have those issues addressed. I mean, fortunately, my closest friend in the program, we've read each other's work consistently through the past 3 years, but I think it would have been very different. I would have felt very isolated had I not made that connection with him.
That is really, like, I didn't expect an answer at all, so, you know, that's extremely valuable. Thank you.
Cool.
So, since this is still a relatively new program, one of the challenges is that we have a limited number of assistantships and teaching slots. Do you have any advice on this, how to address it with your professors, or how to pursue assistantships?
That is tough, because in some ways, students and faculty kind of have their hands tied. I mean, students especially, because we don't handle the budgeting, and as I've seen in other programs, like, it's always up in the air what kind of budget and what kind of opportunities are going to be offered. But I will say I did my very best to make it clear my first semester. Like, I took the comp theory class, which I think is still required for everyone to take. And I made it very clear to the instructor, like, I really want to teach, and I want to do my best work in here to help me be prepared for teaching. So just establishing that initial interest, I think, is very important. I think I told Stephanie as the director too. So just making, because not everyone wants to teach, and so it can be really helpful for them to know who's very interested and maybe who's not. As early, you know, the first semester, even if you, like, we don't get to start teaching until the second year, but it's still very helpful for them to know that you really want to, and that's your goal. Was there a second part to that question?
Just, if you weren't able to receive adequate funding, how did you handle this? Did you have an outside job?
Well, my first year, I was in a different kind of life situation, but I was working in a restaurant many hours every week, and whatever I had saved up a little bit before I came here and whatever I was making then, but it was very challenging. I don't think, even within that first year, I was like, if I don't get some kind of support, I wouldn't have been able to continue. So that is important to keep in mind. And there are other opportunities outside of teaching that our department, I don't want people to feel discouraged. Like, there are other opportunities outside of teaching that you can get funding from. But I really wanted to teach because I want to continue in my life to teach. So teaching was very important, and also getting some financial support would be important too.
So let's return to the thesis.
Yeah.
So when Well, you actually had answered this already. I was going to ask when you would start thinking about it.
Yeah,
But
before you enter.
yeah. So, how did you decide to what you were going to work on for your thesis?
Yeah. Well, I had, fortunately our class there's a design, like you can generally, even unless it's like some kind of special topics class that you know what kind of subject matter and expectations are before you enter it. I will say like in um, just a general poetry workshop class, you get a lot of freedom to write and explore whatever you want to. So I took that early on, which was very helpful. So I would recommend maybe taking the workshops in your genre early if you want to have a space to explore that. Or alternately, you could take them later and get feedback about things you need to work on. But if we go back to wanting to know our issues earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that might seem kind of late. But it's
Yeah.
just a personal decision. So you're asking when you would start thinking about that?
Oh, yeah.
Or...
Just how you chose it, and
Mm.
you know.
So I looked. So I just kind of wrote. I knew that I wanted to. There were certain things I wanted to strengthen. I wanted to learn to create better images. I wanted to really
Mm-hmm.
strengthen my imagery and concision. So my big focus coming in was like I know I used to write these long, unorganized sort of, yeah, a lot of it needed to be cut. So I wanted to focus on, images and concision. Um, so that was my goal. So I just kind of wrote to that. And unfortunately, I don't know if this was sort of an intuitive thing, but by working on that, I realized that when I stepped back at the content I had produced in those workshop classes and even an eco poetry class, which was a good chance to do that, that there was sort of these overarching themes between the
Mm-hmm.
poems. So they were trying to have a conversation with them. And once I realized that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to let you. I'm going to work with you. I tried to fight it. Like, I oftentimes, like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to step back and do this other thing. But I just stepped back and looked at what I had, what they're trying to say. And fortunately, they were actually trying to work together and do something. So, because they were coming from a similar place. So I think identifying the voice and the source of what emotion or what idea or just what I wanted to say. My friend Drew, I he's seen me freak out many times about the thesis and be like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And he's like, what do you care about? What do you care about writing about? And sometimes you can take this big crisis and boil it down to, okay, what do I want to say? What do I care about? And
Mm-hmm.
then let yourself do that. And so, fortunately, I was able, getting back to the thesis, to take what I had and then begin thinking more broadly, how can I build on this? Where do I want to go with this?
That's excellent. Thank you. Now, do you have? Oh, actually, how did you choose your thesis committee?
So Sandy was my thesis advisor. So naturally, she was on it. I worked with her because I respect her as a poet. She's a lovely person, and so that was a natural, easy
Mm-hmm.
choice. I've taken advantage of any opportunity to work with her. So she was a natural choice. And then I had taken English classes as electives, which I encourage any of you to do, to make use of your elective in something that you're interested in. And so Dr. Stengel from the Lit department, I had taken 2 courses with him. And so, and I think he's very intelligent, and I like, his take on it. I think it would be really interesting to bring someone in and have them look at it. So I chose him because of that. And then Stephanie Vanderslice, I'd also been in several classes with her, and I like her. She's a very empathetic person. Even though she doesn't identify as a poet, I trusted her as a reader with this. So I
Mm-hmm.
sort of set up a range. Like I wanted the literary, kind of maybe more critical angle. Um, Sandy, who'd been with me from the beginning and knew what I wanted to do and helped me make those craft decisions for it. And also just a very smart reader like Stephanie, who's also very empathetic. And they all 3 are, but there was a nice range there.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So, do you have any general advice or anything we didn't cover that you would like to pass on to the next generation?
Ooh, well, it goes by much faster than you think. So it's almost feeling emotional here looking at
Mm-hmm.
you, and we're both about to graduate and leave. Um, so definitely make the most of it and and communicate what you want out of this program. Like, don't be afraid to go talk with fellow students and make plans, or talk with faculty and see how what you would like to see supported. Um, because yeah, just make the most of it, and it 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 this program has a lot to offer. I think anyone as a new program, because it's so inviting, and it's not set in any kind of way. It wants to grow. It wants to be its best self, and so I think that's just a perfect match for anyone coming in who wants to be their best self.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I
Thank
really
you,
appreciate it.
Amber. We're gonna have a hug after this, but
Well,
thank you guys.